Lord, we love you. Please guide us into your word. Help us seek you and help us be transformed by your word so that we wouldn't simply be puffed up with knowledge. So in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, today is Daniel chapter 4. If you were with us last week, which there were only 3 of us here, but we went to the book of Esther, and that's because it was the Feast of Purim. And so we ate our Hamantashen and we ate food, and then we watched the movie Scream afterwards, which was kind of fun. But today we're back in the book of Daniel, and we are in Daniel chapter 4. And so in your mind, rewind from the book of Esther about like 100 years or so. Or actually, I guess maybe a little bit more than that. But we're in Daniel chapter 4. And I've got this like outline back up here, just because I'm trying to keep in mind like the stuff that we're kind of looking at here. The first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel are narrative. The last 6 are focused on prophecies. And so we are slowly but surely getting through this, and we are now in the back half of the narrative portion of Daniel. Right, so we're about halfway through the whole Aramaic section, but today's chapter is going to be the last chapter dealing with Nebuchadnezzar, and then the final 2 chapters in the narrative section are going to be dealing with somebody else, as we will see next week. Right here is another breakdown of the Aramaic section in particular. And as you can see, today we are going to reach, at the very end of today's chapter, in the final verse, we are going to reach the center point of the chiasm. Which means that, in other words, the end of this chapter really marks like what many scholars believe to be the central focus of the narrative section in the book of Daniel, which in a way would actually, I guess you could argue that this would be the central purpose of the book as a whole, at least in the Gentile section, right? The section that is focused primarily on the Babylonians, right? Because we kind of talked about how that seems to be why the text switches to Aramaic. Mm-hmm. So before we actually hop into the text itself, let me ask y'all, with that outline on there to kind of help you out, what has happened in the book of Daniel so far? We're 4 chapters in, so let's do 3 chapters of recap.
So, the first chapter is about Nebuchadnezzar has a dream.
Okay, well, even before that, so this is like, let's do, there's chapter 1.
Yes.
What happened in chapter 1?
Okay, so chapter 1 is the overview, and Daniel and his friends are exiled into Babylon, and they are forced to change their names. They are forced to learn the customs and the ways of the Babylonian culture, which they all do. Mm-hmm. But the one thing they draw a line on here is that they ask to be fed, it says vegetables in the scripture in English, but more than likely looking at the Greek, it's grain, right?
Grain, yeah.
Yeah, and then they end up becoming more like stronger and healthier when compared to the other Jewish men who were given king's choice food.
Yeah, and so that chapter kind of just lays the groundwork for the whole book. Mm-hmm. It basically just sums up what their experience in Babylon is going to be like. Right? These people are constantly going to be tested, and they constantly have to figure out where to draw the line. And so that in that example, it actually not that much was at stake. Right? I mean, it was just literally what food are we going to eat, and they decided, I guess, that steak itself was not on the menu. And so they just ate seed. But then we move on, and then we get a little bit more specific, and that's where we get to the Aramaic section, so it's no longer Hebrew but Aramaic. And what happens in chapter 2? So chapters 2, 3, and 4 are all focused on a guy named Nebuchadnezzar. What happens in chapter 2?
Well, in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream that he wants to get interpreted, so he brings in all of his like spiritualists, mediums, soothsayers, like all those kinds of people who he's paying to do this kind of stuff. And he says, I don't just want you to interpret the dream that I tell you, I want you to tell my dream back to me.
And then interpret it.
Yeah, and then interpret it, because he was basically trying to find out which of them had a connection to gods, or God. And they were like, well, none of us could do this. You know, there's no man alive who has this power. And then was like, I can do it, but it's not really me. It's God giving me the power to do this. So God helps Daniel to interpret the dream. God shows Daniel Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and in the dream, there's this giant statue that rises up out of the ground, comprised of 4 different metals of varying qualities. The head is gold, the body and the arms are silver, the upper part of the legs are bronze, I'm pretty sure, and then the lower part of the legs are a mixture of iron and clay. And Daniel says to Nebuchadnezzar that the different metals represent different kingdoms that are to come and fall. And he says that Babylon represents the golden head. So that's, Nebuchadnezzar. Which Nebuchadnezzar had guessed himself from that part. But in the dream, the statue is shattered from the feet by a rock, which represents the kingdom of God, that then grows into a mountain.
Yeah.
That takes the whole earth.
Yeah. Which is intriguing, pretty cool. And that dream in particular, you want to keep in the back of your head, because later on, when we get to chapter 7, so remember, chapter 7 is going to be the final Aramaic chapter, but it's also the first chapter that goes into Daniel's visions. Daniel himself is going to have a dream/vision, and he's basically going to see the same exact thing, just instead of it being 4 metals on a statue, it's going to be 4 beasts, and then there is going to be a metaphorical stone that breaks it, that breaks the statue, but it's going to be one like a son of man riding on the clouds of heaven. And so keep that in mind, because like we talked about, chapter 7 is going to be basically the central chapter of the entire book.
Yeah.
So keep that story in mind. And then we get to chapter 3, and since Sean's one person who hasn't done the chapter yet, Sean, what happens in chapter 3? Well, you don't have to give a super in-depth recap, but...
Yeah. Basically, the very short version is that Nebuchadnezzar brings everyone together, erects a really tall statue, and tries to force everyone to bow down to it, to unite them all under one, God. And basically, everyone except for 3 men, which we know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, refuse to bow, and this results in eventually Nebuchadnezzar forcing them to go into a really hot furnace.
Yep.
And they end up not dying in the furnace. They actually get preserved, not just their skin, but their clothes and everything. Nothing gets burnt. And also, Nebuchadnezzar seems to notice a 4th man in the fire, which is very strange. He says that he looks like a son of the gods, and but we don't know if anyone else notices it. And then basically, they come out, and Nebuchadnezzar basically says, well, y'all's God is obviously more powerful. So, I don't remember if there's anything else to the end of that story.
So he does issue an edict.
So he did, and the edict says it's like he will put to death anyone who curses or profanes his God.
Yeah, so it's basically, he doesn't convert, spoiler alert, that's kind of heading where this next chapter is heading. He doesn't fully convert to Yahwism or to becoming a Jew, but he does absolutely reverse his position, right? The chapter begins in chapter 3 with him saying, anybody who worships any other God is being put to death. Whereas now he says, okay, there's an exception. You can worship the God of Israel.
And politically,
which is cool.
And politically, all he's trying to do here is he was trying to unify the whole state under one religion.
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, and so really, Nebuchadnezzar is successfully doing what people were trying to do at the Tower of Babel, right? To where he's trying to make one world religion, one world culture, and in chapter 3, the only people who are refusing are these 3 Jewish guys who say, no, we will not be part of this new Babel system. We are going to stand strong, and we will only worship our one true God. Last thing before we get to chapter 4, I know we need to get to the chapter. What do chapters 2 and 3 in particular have in common? So obviously, there's going to be a common denominator through all of this.
Okay.
But remember, we're specifically in the Aramaic section.
2 and 3 is where the Jewish people, in this case, in the case of the furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and then in the first instance with the food, I believe it was Daniel.
So that's still chapter 1. So
okay, sorry,
yeah. So chapters 2 and 3 are the dream and then the furnace.
okay, I got it mixed up.
So what do those 2 chapters have in common? Because chapters 1 and 3 obviously have the idea of like Jewish people being tested and resisting. But chapters 2 and 3, what do they have in common? I'm trying to get us to figure out what is this whole Aramaic section about.
They're from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective. They're not from Daniel's perspective.
Yeah. And what is Nebuchadnezzar learning throughout this?
That
Like, what is his character arc?
he's
He's the main character.
basically discovering more and more that like the God of the Israelites is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, very powerful. Much more powerful than he ever would have thought.
Yeah. Especially whenever you consider who did he represent in chapter like what was he represented by in chapter 2 in the dream?
The golden head.
He was the head of gold, right? And by the end of that dream, the statue is shattered.
Yeah.
Right? But whenever you get to the beginning of by the end of chapter 2, the statue is shattered. When you get to the beginning of chapter 3, though, what does he construct?
A statue of gold.
A statue of gold, right? And so it seems like he's not getting the message yet, right? But then by the end of chapter 3, he's starting to get the message, right? To where it's like all of a sudden, he's like, maybe there is something to this God of Israel, right? Even though in chapter 2, he did learn, okay, well, apparently there's something to the God of Israel because Daniel was able to perceive this dream better than anybody else, right? And so if you're just following Nebuchadnezzar's character arc, it is following the trajectory of a man who is very proud, and he's slowly but surely being humbled. And today's chapter is going to be like the climax of that story arc. Like I said, this is the final chapter with Nebuchadnezzar. And so, that being said, let's hop into it, starting in verse 1, reading through verse 9. Take it away, Sean.
Nebuchadnezzar the king to all the peoples, nations, and men of every tongue that inhabit all the earth. May your peace abound. It has seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, and how strong are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house, and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream, and it made me fearful. And these fantasies as I lay on my bed, and the visions in my head kept alarming me. So I gave a decree to bring into my presence all the wise men of Babylon, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the conjurers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners came in, and I said the dream to them, but they could not make its interpretation known to me. But at last, Daniel came in before me, whose name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is a spirit of the holy gods. And I said the dream to him, O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, since I know that a spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is difficult for you, say to me the visions of my dream which I have seen, along with its interpretation.
Okay. So, right off the bat, what do you notice is strange about the structure of this entire chapter?
It's written like a speech.
It's written like a speech or like a letter or something like
Yeah.
that, right? Also, beyond that, so that's already the big thing.
It basically follows the format of chapter 2
Yes.
as well.
So it's a speech. Who's the one speaking?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar. Also very weird. So this is a first-person perspective chapter, but it's from the perspective not of Daniel, but of Nebuchadnezzar, which is interesting. And then, fast forward beyond even that, what seems very odd from the very beginning of this speech?
Seems like he's addressing everybody.
So he's speaking to everybody, but like what is the goal of the speech? He kind of gives us the thesis statement in verse 2 and 3.
It has seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me.
What's interesting about that? Who's he talking about?
He's talking about Yahweh.
Yahweh. But the thing is, at the end of last chapter, Nebuchadnezzar was not like a Yahweh worshiper,
Yeah.
right? He was simply saying, hey guys, there might be something to this.
Mm-hmm.
But then now all of a sudden, he's like, hey guys, I want to proclaim what God has done for me. So what does this immediately make you want to like what are you immediately wondering as a reader?
What did God do for you?
What? Yeah, first off you're saying, did he convert? And then secondly you're saying, what made him convert? Like, what did God do? And so what I like is that this, do y'all know what the phrase in media res is?
Yeah.
So like that's like the idea of like whenever a story starts, like, you know, like a movie or a TV show will do this a lot, where, you know, it starts with a scene way later on, and then it says 5 hours earlier, and then it cuts back, and then you see what leads up to it. That's kind of how this chapter starts. It starts in media res, where chapter 3 literally ends with it saying, Nebuchadnezzar, therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue that says anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses reduced to a rubbish heap, inasmuch as there is no other God who is able to deliver in this way. That's really good, right? It seems like he appreciates Yahweh a lot, but he never says, I am now only worshiping Yahweh. And then it says, then the king caused Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to succeed in the province of Babylon. That's how chapter 3 ends. Then it immediately cuts to this. And it's like, Nebuchadnezzar's like, hey guys, I want everybody to know what the Lord has done for me. And you're like, what did he do? Right? It's like, all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? And then his speech is going to flash back. And he's going to say, let me tell you. Which is really cool. From a strictly Christian perspective, what does this immediately make you think of? Like application-wise, like, honestly, this works in an evangelical framework. Like,
No,
as Baptists.
It seems like it's when you maybe like confront a fellow believer or an unbeliever about their sin, right? Maybe that their ways are wrong, and then they're like, oh, you're kind of that aha moment where they're like, oh, I see what I'm doing is wrong, I must repent.
Okay, but like what I'm getting at is, what does it sound like Nebuchadnezzar is doing? Like, what is his speech? Like, what do we typically call this? Whenever he's evangelizing / sharing his testimony, in the sense of he's literally just saying, hey guys, I want to testify about what God has done in my life. Which is wild, because you really don't see many examples of this in Scripture. Right? I mean, once you get to the New Testament, you have Paul doing this a lot, right? Paul's like, I need to tell everybody about the Damascus Road, and like he just keeps repeating it. But you don't see a lot of people doing this.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, like Nebuchadnezzar, who has been a bad guy for most of this story, and like, in the Jewish mind, he's the guy who destroys Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
Yet all of a sudden, he's like, I must tell everybody what Yahweh has done. It's like, what? It's like, this is crazy.
If you're looking back at the Nebuchadnezzar who's portrayed in 2 Kings, you're like, this guy is the pinnacle of villains in the Bible. Like, right alongside, you know, some of the people who end up crucifying Jesus.
Yeah.
But then you get to Daniel, and it's kind of like, no, this guy's actually kind of sick.
Which, it's interesting, though, because I think I might have mentioned this 2 weeks ago. I don't remember if I did or not. But there are some people who try to argue that Daniel was written at a much later date.
Yeah.
Right? They try to argue that it was written like during the Maccabean time period. And that's because, later on, as we're going to see, there are clear moments where Daniel accurately predicts things through Alexander the Great all the way to the Maccabean period. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people say, oh, it was written then. This would actually argue against that, though. Because if you look at the Maccabees, the way that they viewed their political oppressors is in like a very negative light. You need to hit the P2 button. Oh. But the way that they viewed it was like in a... should turn green. There you go. They viewed their oppressors in like a very negative light. I mean, that's why the Maccabees rose up and revolted against their oppressors. Whereas Daniel does not seem to be writing from the perspective of somebody who like hates Nebuchadnezzar. He writes from the perspective of somebody who genuinely lived in Nebuchadnezzar's courts and actually was an advisor to where he actually liked this guy. And he doesn't seem to like you actually feel the closeness between Daniel and this person. Whereas if you're just reading 2 Kings, Nebuchadnezzar does just feel like a mustache-twirling villain. Whereas you read this, you're like, he's a complicated person. And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And it actually argues for an earlier date. But yeah, so let's walk through this.
And kind of sidetrack application thing. I think this also speaks to our like political environment and having like someone from the other political party immediately wins. We're like, oh, we're going to do everything to undermine this person's rule, authority, whatever. When this actually goes very counter to that.
Yeah, this reminds us that God can literally work through anybody. Like Nebuchadnezzar is like, first off, he's the king of Babylon, and Babylon is considered like the epitome of the enemies of God. And God's going to work through Nebuchadnezzar, right? But then again, we have to ask, what is... Oh, somebody's here. Oh, it's your food. your food is here. Come get your food. I got excited. I was like, somebody else showed up. But no, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that God actually did?
Yeah.
Because, like, all because Daniel shows a more favorable portrait of Nebuchadnezzar doesn't mean that the other people were lying, right?
Yeah.
It just means that a big transformation occurred, right? Nebuchadnezzar was one way, now he's another. We have to figure out what happened, and he's going to tell us the story. So, Nebuchadnezzar, the king to all the peoples, nations, and men of every tongue that inhabit all the earth. That language in and of itself should remind you of the Tower of Babel story, because we remember that the reason why there are peoples, nations, and different tongues is because of the Tower of Babel story. And now the king of Babylon is writing to all those people, trying to unite them under the one true God. Which is crazy because that's literally a reversal of Babel.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is interesting. May your peace abound. It has seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me. Notice he does not say done to me or done before me, right? Because if it said like before me, you might think of, like the previous chapter, right? Where it's like, okay, he saw the fourth man in the fire. Or the chapter before that, oh, he gave me a dream. He says that God did something for him, which means that something's going to happen to Nebuchadnezzar where he concludes, God actually did this for my benefit, and I need to declare it. So you're like, what's going to happen? So it kind of just lets you know that whatever's going to happen next is going to be a very personal thing to Nebuchadnezzar. How great are his signs? How strong are his wonders? His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. All right. On one hand, why is this declaration so surprising?
Nebuchadnezzar has to humble himself because he himself is a king. And usually people that are in that power, especially if you're a pagan nation, they don't want anything to do with the God who's going to have more power than them. So he's having to recognize that God has more power than himself.
And you have to keep in mind that kings like this just use religion as like a control structure to keep people in line, right?
Yeah. Whereas he seems to be recognizing that this one God, he is more powerful than him, right? Even when you go back to chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar didn't reject Daniel and say, no, my kingdom will last forever. It seems like he accepted his place, right? Okay, my kingdom is the kingdom of gold, but it's going to shine really brightly while I'm alive, Whereas right here he says, no, God's is an everlasting kingdom. And you're wondering, how did he come to again, who we know Nebuchadnezzar is versus how he's talking right now, it's like, I don't know, this is like as if Hitler came out and said, hey, I can't wait to tell everybody how amazing the Jews are. You'd be like, what happened to Hitler? It's like, you'd be like, this is not normal, right? And so we're trying to figure out what's going on here. And I don't know, I just think it's a really cool chapter because of how much it hooks you. You're like, wow, I want to listen closely. Two other things about this. I want you to keep in mind what he's saying right here in verse 3, because we're going to have to contrast it with something that he says later on in the flashback sequence. And then third thing to say, keep in mind what he says about God right here, because that's going to become relevant when we get to chapter 7, right? Because notice he specifically says that God's kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and God's dominion is from generation to generation. Because in chapter 7, there's going to be one like a son of man riding on the clouds, who's going to receive from God an everlasting kingdom and eternal dominion. Which is interesting, because it's like, wait a second, I thought that belonged to God. You know? And so just keep that in mind. Alright, verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and flourishing in my palace. Alright, right off the bat, you read that, who do you immediately think of? A king being at ease in his house, flourishing in a palace.
David or Solomon?
Relax.
David, right? Actually, you can think of Solomon as well. I think chiefly of David because whenever you think of David flourishing in a palace, what story does that set up? Bathsheba, right? So you have David at the height of his power, but he's at ease in his palace, and that sets up this moment where he's going to be severely humbled. All right? Let's consider Solomon as well. Solomon, what happened when he was at the height of his power?
Lots of wives and concubines.
Yeah, what moment was that? Where was Solomon at the greatest of ease?
After he built the temple?
After he built the temple. And then immediately after that, God shows up and says, Solomon, be careful, right? You might fall. And then immediately after that, we read that he started multiplying wives, concubines, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So if you've been reading the Bible closely, there's a trajectory. Whenever kings are in their house, whenever they're at ease in their house and flourishing in their palace, what typically comes afterwards?
Sin.
Sin, right? Usually they swell in pride, and God has to humble them. But what's interesting about that in particular is that what do David and Solomon have in common that Nebuchadnezzar does not?
They were
They're
God's
really
anointed.
kings.
They were anointed kings of God's chosen people. Nebuchadnezzar is not. He's just a foreign king of another nation. So we would expect God to act that way with David and Solomon because he promised David that he would treat David's seed like sons, right? He's disciplining them because he wants them humble. You wouldn't expect that with Nebuchadnezzar. But this is going to tie into kind of like the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had before with the statue, because basically that statue seems to represent the so-called time of the Gentiles, right? The idea that God has removed the throne from David and he has actually placed Gentile kings over the house of Israel. And therefore, even though Nebuchadnezzar is not a chosen seed, God is still going to kind of treat him like a son. And that's why even later on, we're going to hear about Cyrus, and he's going to be called God's anointed, which is crazy, because it's like, wait, what? But it's like during this time of the Gentiles thing, there is like a little shift. And so God is going to treat this Gentile king very similarly to how he treats the son of David. And I have to follow this up. Application-wise, why is that important to us as Christians? You have a Gentile king being treated the same way as you have one of the sons of David.
Because we are Gentiles who are treated the same as the people of God.
Yeah, well, specifically, whenever God looks at us, he views us through the lens of his son, right? He treats us in the same way that he would treat his son. And so just keep that in mind. Because again, I think this chapter is where you're beginning to see what the goal of Daniel's book is about, right? To where you get to see that God does have a mission for the Gentile people as well. And ironically, Deuteronomy 32, it is Israel's rebellion that leads to Gentile inclusion, right? Nebuchadnezzar would not be in the situation if Israel had been faithful. But through the rebellion, God sent them off, and now Nebuchadnezzar is going to be humbled, and it's going to be a really cool story. So I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream, and it made me fearful. And these fantasies, as I lay on my bed, and the visions in my head kept alarming me. All right off the bat, what do we know about this dream?
It's scary.
It's a scary dream, which tells us that Nebuchadnezzar probably already had an idea what the dream was about. And as we'll see, the dream is actually not that hard to interpret. It's honestly, the previous dream in chapter 2 didn't seem entirely difficult to interpret, but this one's going to be even easier, right? So he can tell this is bad news, which also makes it very similar to the previous dream. Right off the bat, a king has a scary dream. What do you think he's probably dreaming of?
The destruction of his kingdom.
Yeah, right? I mean, he's probably not talking about being like, I don't know, chased around by an axe murderer. That'd be weird, right? Obviously, his dream is going to have something to do with the kingdom and it being ripped from him. Because that would be the reason why he's like letting people know. It's not like.
And then he also has some reason to believe that it's divine.
Yes. Yeah, so he has a reason to believe that this is like a dream from God. So I gave a decree to bring into my presence all the wise men of Babylon, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. What does this sound like?
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. We've been there before. Apparently this was his regular modus operandi, right? He just, had a scary dream, call the magicians, because that was their job, right? They're supposed to be dream interpreters. So I gave the decree to bring them all in, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the conjurers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners came in. Hey, those are the same groups as the previous time.
Yay.
And I said the dream to them, but they could not make its interpretation known to me. Okay, so what's interesting here?
It's different.
Mm-hmm.
Before he didn't ask them, he demanded that they tell the dream to him and not and then interpret it. Whereas this time he actually told them the dream.
Yeah. So we talked about this. Why do you think? Last time, why is it that he didn't tell them the dream? Most likely.
Because he wanted to test them.
Yes, he wanted to test them because he wanted to see if they could accurately, he wanted to know that they weren't making stuff up, right? But the question becomes, then why would he tell them this dream? Because couldn't they just make stuff up?
Well, no, he already knows that they're like, not connected to.
Then why would he ask them to begin with?
I don't know, because he's really scared.
Okay. So I'm trying to get us to a specific interpretation because I think that maybe there's a little bit more going on here.
What's the question?
So I was saying, in chapter 2, he did not tell them the dream
Right.
because he wanted them to demonstrate that they had access to like divine knowledge.
Mhm.
This time though, he does tell them the dream, which would seem to suggest that they could make something up if they wanted to. But for some reason, he's not afraid of that. And so the question becomes, why is he telling them this dream? I'm trying to figure out if we can deduce what the dream's going to be about before he even, he tells us. Because I think that you kind of can. He doesn't seem to think that they would be tempted to make something up this time. Or let me ask you this. Let's kind of
Maybe
rewind.
it's because there's only like one way to really interpret the dream.
That really is the case, right? I think it's because Nebuchadnezzar already knows what the dream means,
Yeah.
right? Whereas back in chapter 2, I think that there's different ways to interpret it, right? For instance, we talked about this. If you're a magician or sorcerer and the king calls you to interpret a dream, what type of interpretation do you typically want to give them?
A good one.
A good one, right? If you give them a bad interpretation, they might chop your head off.
Like in a Joseph story.
Yes, right, exactly. So if you go back to chapter 2, if they had known the dream ahead of time, what spin could they have put on it to make it sound favorable to Nebuchadnezzar?
King, your enemies will be fallen before you.
Yes, they could say, oh, well, you're the stone that destroyed all the other stone, like the statue, and you're going to grow into a mountain, right? And so there was a clear way where they could change that one to misrepresent it, right? Whereas I think that we could argue that this one, he already knows the interpretation. He's just looking to see if they will, confirm it, right? And so when it says, I said the dream to them, but they could not make an interpretation known to me, I don't think that they don't actually know the interpretation. What do you think that's actually going on here?
They just don't want to say it because they're afraid for their lives.
I think that's more likely what's going on, right? I think it's that they could not make it known because they realized that if they did, they might get killed. Because I think that basically when they hear the dream, it is so obviously not good news for Nebuchadnezzar that they're like, yeah, they're like, we don't want to say this, right? I think that that's probably what's going on here. That kind of would explain the difference here. Because also we've seen that Nebuchadnezzar is terrified. Like he recognizes this is not good. He tells them, he's not even playing around this time. He's like, hey, I'm not even going to test you. This is what the dream was. Doesn't mean what I think it is. And they're like, king, we don't know. That's a hard one. Whereas he's kind of like, okay.
It's like, oh man, that's tough.
Yeah. And some people might be tempted to think, oh, well, maybe these are both two made-up stories, and they come from different traditions, and that explains the differences, right? That's what a skeptic might try to argue.
Yeah.
But then you look at the next few verses, and it directly hinges on us being aware of the previous story. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that wouldn't really make much sense. Or if the stories were reversed, it'd be easier. Like, oh, well, he told them the first time, then he didn't tell them later. Whereas I think that if you know chapter 2, then it kind of shapes how you interpret this one. So they could not make the interpretation known to me. But at last, Daniel came in before me. Right? It's you can almost feel like the sigh of relief. It's like, oh, at last Daniel came in. Whose name is Belteshazzar. What's that?
Chief of the magicians.
Chief of the magicians, yes. But at last Daniel came in before me, whose name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is a spirit of the holy gods. All right,
so
so
he recognizes that Daniel has a divine spirit in him.
yes.
Yes.
So he recognized that Daniel has a divine spirit, but at this point in the story, he still says the holy gods, right? Not just one God, which again draws you in because you're like, wait a second. But earlier you were saying the Most High God, and so this is like one of those things where you realize, oh, so this story is the story of why he came to worship the Most High God. Does that make sense? Because he's not apparently there yet, but he's on the way there. So in Daniel is the spirit of the holy gods, and I said the dream to him. O Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, since I know that a spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is difficult for you. Say to me the visions of my dream, which I have seen, along with its interpretation. So he says, Daniel, you've proven yourself in the past. I know that you know this dream. Please help me out. Which is...
It's weird that he doesn't tell Daniel the dream. He's like, tell me the dream.
Yeah, he's like, prove it to me.
He's like, well, I know that you can read my mind, so go for it.
Just tell me.
Just tell me.
So I think that in the next verse, he is going to be the one to tell it, though. I think that whatever he says, say to me the visions of my dream, I think he's saying, say to me the interpretation. Because he's about to tell him. So, right off the bat, what does this say about how he views Daniel?
Very highly.
Yeah.
You made him head of the magicians.
Yeah, well, and it also seems to be that he's aware of the fact that maybe the other magicians just aren't telling him what he knows. Like he says, Daniel, if you told me that you didn't know, I would not believe that. Right? He's like, no. He's like, I know that no mystery is too difficult for you. I know that you, for a fact, will know this interpretation.
How cool of a title is Belteshazzar, Chief of the Magicians, though?
That is a great title, Nick. Yes, it's a very good title.
Behold, I shall call you Belteshazzar, Chief of the Magicians.
Yeah, and you chose to go by Daniel? Come on now. Yeah, but no, I really like this because it says, like, the other magicians, they're like, we don't know what the interpretation is. And so Nebuchadnezzar's like, okay, bring in Daniel, because I know for a fact that he will know. Like, he's like, y'all are scrubs compared to Daniel. So we move on, verses 10 through 14. Or actually, let's do verses just 10 through 12 first. Never mind. 10 through 14, it's fine.
Now these were the visions in my head, as I lay on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its foliage was beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the sky inhabited its branches, and all flesh fed itself from it. I was looking in the visions in my head as I lay on my bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. He called out loudly and said thus, chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its foliage, and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from its branches.
Alright, so, right off the bat, what's going on in the dream?
So essentially, he's talking about a tree that provides the whole world nourishment, shade, shelter, and abundance. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a tree of life, essentially.
Essentially, yeah, it's like the tree of life we see in
Garden of Eden and
yeah,
Revelation.
basically, yeah.
It's like, well, it's kind of a mixture of Tree of Life and the Tower of Babel in a way, because it talks about like reaching to the sky,
Reaching to the sky, and
but
then
it's not like really painted negatively. It's painted positively.
But I think that language is intentional for sure.
no, I feel like it's hinting at maybe the fall. I feel like it could be the fall of nations. You have a nation that provides all these wonderful things, and then all of a sudden it's gone, or you feel like things are going so well, and then all of a sudden it's just gone.
Yeah. Which, again, that's why I'm suggesting that this dream's pretty easy to interpret. Because, like, unlike the statue dream, like, this one's, like, you can very clearly tell what seems to be in mind here. But let's walk through the details to see if there's any, like, biblical stuff that we can, outside of Daniel, that we can pick up on. Now, these were the visions in my head as I lay on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. So, we already kind of talked about this. Why, even just from that phrase by itself, what makes you think about the tree of life?
Tree in the midst of.
Yeah, because where was the tree of life? It was in the midst of the garden, right? And so now we have a giant tree that's in the midst of the earth, and so immediately you're thinking, oh, tree of life, and what was the whole point of the tree of life?
To sustain Adam and Eve while they worked in the garden.
Yeah, it was to sustain them, and it was basically like, you could almost argue that it's like the holy of holies of the Garden of Eden, right? Like, some people have argued that in many ways, like the Garden of Eden was like supposed to be like a temple, right? To where it's like you got the world, which is like the outer sanctuary, and then you've got Eden itself, which is the holy place. Then you've got the Garden of Eden, which is the Holy of Holies. And it's almost like the Tree of Life, I guess, is almost like the Ark of the Covenant, right? It's the place where you get eternal life. Like, you go there, you feed from it, and that's where you're supposed to be sustained forever.
Mm-hmm.
But now you have this tree in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and it's not simply in the middle of the Garden of Eden, it's in the middle of the earth, which I think would suggest the imagery of, it's sustaining everything, right? It's like everything else has its power and its sustenance and provision from this tree.
Yeah.
And so if you're Nebuchadnezzar, what are you immediately thinking of?
Your kingdom.
Your kingdom, right? And rightfully so, because like the Babylonian kingdom was giant. And also keep in mind that whenever the Bible says all the earth, it is not thinking what we think of when we think of all the earth. Like, we think of the entire globe. It's talking about the ancient, like, Near Eastern world.
The land.
Right? Yes.
And all the land.
Yeah, so this is not, like, I don't know, some people will take, like, a hyper-literalistic thing where they're thinking, like, Babylon wasn't in charge of Britain. It's like, yes, we know it wasn't in charge of Britain. It's talking about, like, that area, right? Yeah.
King
So,
of the universe, my butt.
yeah. The tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky. Okay. So, whenever it says grew large and became strong, you're again thinking of a kingdom growing, right? Like,
Yeah.
Babylon didn't just like, it wasn't just like, hey, look, it came out of nowhere. It's like, well, no, like, it took time to grow, right? Babylon existed since the time of Tower of Babel. But then, over time, it eventually grew and became strong to where it has now reached its height in Nebuchadnezzar.
Like the statue rising.
Like the statue of the Tower of Babel, which you're supposed to think of in the next line.
Yeah.
And its height reached to the sky. Whenever we read in the Tower of Babel, it talks about its head reaching the heavens, right? Which is basically, the language might even be very similar, but this is Aramaic, so it wouldn't be the same words. But
yeah, that's true.
yeah, so its height reached to the sky, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. So if you were in Texas, you could have seen this tree. No, again, metaphor. The idea is that this is a huge, huge, huge kingdom. Well, it's a huge, huge, huge tree, and we would interpret this as a kingdom. So basically, its presence is felt everywhere you go.
Yeah.
Its foliage was beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. So it actually has the presentation of being a somewhat good thing, right? It's providing and it's doing good. The beasts of the field found shade under it. The birds of the sky inhabited its branches, and all flesh fed itself from it. So what is this tree accomplishing?
Providing provision.
Yeah, it's providing what it's supposed to do, right? Everybody is feasting from this tree, right? So it's not like a tree that's leaving everybody else in famine. It's doing its job.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking in the visions in my head as I lay on my bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. A watcher? That's interesting. We have not encountered that phrase any other place in the Bible so far.
Yeah.
What's a watcher?
Angel.
It is an angel. There are many people who are there are a lot of people who are very familiar with this term. And whenever we hear the term watcher in reference to angel, we don't. The place your mind doesn't typically goes is not actually a book in the Bible. What does your mind typically go to?
Enoch.
The Book of Enoch, right? And so, real quick, Sean, I need to clarify for people online. We're not going to get all culty and weirdy. We're not going to get weird with this. But whenever you do hear the Watchers and stuff, you do think of the Book of Enoch. What's the deal in Enoch about the Watchers and everything?
Yeah. So I guess first Enoch is the same as the Book of Watchers, right?
I believe so.
It's the same thing. Yeah. Long story short, basically, a group of rebellious supernatural beings, angels, they go down to mankind and teach them things they're not supposed to, which is like metallurgy, the art of seduction, astrology, things like that. And basically God punishes them. He sends different archangels to punish them in different ways because they're led by different there's a couple different important figures, but basically they're rebellious angels that come down, and they're also the same ones that are described in Genesis, potentially
That
as
have children with the daughters of man.
in the Jewish mythos, you have the Watchers rebel They come down to Earth. They mate with humans, and they have the Nephilim, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so Watchers are only mentioned 3 times in the Bible, and they're all in this chapter.
Oh, okay.
Which is interesting, just because I mean, it kind of makes sense. But yeah, so whenever you think of the Watchers, you're kind of thinking of like angel, but it might even be a more specific term in reference to like whenever we think of angel, we think of like people flying with like wings and like Cupid or something like that.
Mm.
But we have to remember that in the Bible, an angel is just like it's a job description, not a type of being. Right? An angel is just a messenger, right?
Yeah.
There can be human messenger, like human angels. There can be divine angels, stuff like that. A Watcher is specifically, they would belong to the class like Elohim, right? Like it's a little g god, right? It's a spirit being from the divine realm, and you could almost view this as just like I guess you could just call it an angel, but
These might be kind of like the ones in like Deuteronomy where it says God set sons of God
Yes.
over.
That's what I was
nations.
trying to get to, like in Deuteronomy 32, where it says that whenever God split the nations, He ordered them according to the sons of the gods, right?
Mm.
And we would interpret that as being like the little g gods, which is interesting because again, like it makes sense why the Watcher would show up here, because who is the one having the vision? Nebuchadnezzar, right? If this were a Jewish person having this vision, he might not call this person a Watcher. What might he call this person showing up? Because it might be a different messenger from the Lord showing up. So when you're reading the Old Testament and a messenger from the Lord shows up, what is he typically called?
Angel.
The angel of the Lord, right? Like it's literally just the angel of Yahweh, the messenger of Yahweh.
Like burning bush and
Yes. So like whenever you're in the burning bush or like in the book of Judges and stuff, typically there is the angel from Yahweh who is coming, and that is because Israel is God's portion, right? Whereas Nebuchadnezzar does not belong to Israel, right? And so if you're taking the whole Deuteronomy 32 worldview, Babylon has their own angel of the Lord, and that would be a Watcher, right? And so again, that's kind of a weird theology. Like it's a theology we don't typically talk about, but it makes sense, right? It's like, okay, Nebuchadnezzar is having this dream. We're typically, like, we're used to seeing the angel of the Lord show up, and we would typically interpret that as being Jesus himself. But this would not be Jesus. This would just be another Watcher, most likely. And so I was looking in the visions in my head as I lay on my bed, and behold, a Watcher, a Holy One, descended from heaven. Another fun fact is that the word Watcher could also be translated as just like the awake one, right? Like just I'm pretty sure the word just comes from like the word light, like it's like to see, I believe. So it's just like waking, watchful, wakeful one, and I think that actually makes the most sense if you consider what is Nebuchadnezzar doing right now.
like sleeping.
He's sleeping, and his sleeping is producing confusion, right? That's why he needs an interpretation. So all of a sudden you have this Watcher or this awake one showing up, and what does he show up to do? If sleeping brings confusion, then the awake ones have
like
answers or understanding, right?
Understand.
And so if you kind of like read it like that, it makes sense. Like I would almost prefer like the translation as like the awake one. You're not getting my food, but this is not your food. So I was looking at the visions in my head as I lay on my bed, and behold, a Watcher, a Holy One, descended from heaven. He called out loudly and said thus, "Chop down the tree and cut off its branches. Strip off its foliage and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from its branches." Ooh.
Destruction.
Yes, destruction. Also, imagery. You have this tree that's head was in the heavens, and then you have a Watcher coming down. What does that again make you think of?
Tower of Babel.
Tower of Babel, right?
Yeah.
Where you've got the tower with its head in the heavens, and God comes down. And notice he says, "Let us split them up," right? He doesn't say, "I'm going to split them up." He says, "Let us." And that would probably be the idea of God talking to his heavenly council, right? Which would be the Watchers. So there you go. So he calls out and says, "Chop down the tree, cut off its branches." Well, that's not good news for the tree. And so what does the interpretation seem to be? Again, Daniel's going to interpret it for us, but I'm just trying to see if we can naturally get at this.
Babylon shall fall.
Yeah, the kingdom is going to fall, right? If this represents a kingdom, as we're assuming. strip off its foliage and scatter its fruit. Let the beast flee from under it and the birds from its branches. Why would the beast flee from under it and the birds from its branches?
Because it's no longer providing
doesn't provide
protection.
food, it doesn't provide shelter.
Yeah, so why do they have to flee and fly away? What's happening to the tree?
It's dying.
It's dying.
Well, yeah, the thing's gonna come crashing down, right? It literally says, chop down the tree. What happens if you're underneath the tree whenever it falls?
You get crushed.
You get
Yeah.
crushed.
Yeah.
What happens if you're still in the branches whenever it falls?
You
You
did.
get crushed, right? The idea is, get out of this tree, because it's coming down.
This is like whenever God talked to Jerusalem and said, y'all need to flee before I'm going to destroy it. Those who flee will survive.
Yeah, and Jesus will say the same thing in Matthew 24 and 25 when he says, hey guys, whenever you see the abomination of desolation put in place, you might want to skedaddle and get out of Jerusalem.
Get to the mountains.
Yes, get to the mountains because it's coming down. Okay, so we move on. Please read that, Sean.
Yet leave the stump with its roots in the earth, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, in the new grass of the field. And let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beast in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from that of a man, and let the heart of a beast be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. This edict is by the resolution of the watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High is the most powerful ruler over the kingdom of mankind, and gives it to whom he wishes, and sets up over it the lowliest of men. This is the dream which I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, say to me its interpretation, inasmuch as none of the wise men of my kingdom is able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for a spirit of the holy gods is in you.
All right. So, what does the Watcher command concerning the tree?
Leave a stump with its roots in the earth, but put a band of iron and bronze around it. So we're talking about some kind of entrapment, right? So what I'm getting from this is leave some sort of remnant, leave them entrapped and kind of controlled, and then let them be nourished and dwell with the remaining beings.
Alright, let's walk through it. Yet leave the stump, so the imagery is of the tree being chopped down. Yet leave the stump with its roots in the earth. Okay, what is that imagery?
Talking about maybe a faithful remnant.
Well, let's just explain the imagery first. If this is a tree, what's going on?
Just being cut like flush to the ground, basically.
Yeah. For instance, I've been doing a lot of yard work in the backyard, and there are some plants that I wanted to get rid of, and if I wanted to get rid of them, I had to dig a lot deeper, right? I had to uproot them. Other plants, I was fine with them growing back, and so I just cut them down, but I left the stump, because it'll take a few more years for them to get back to where they were, and then I'll just cut it back down again, you know? So, he's saying, don't cut the tree down entirely and don't uproot it, just cut it down to a stump. What would be the purpose of this? Again, what is the purpose of me doing that with a tree outside?
It'll eventually regrow.
Yeah. I'm not trying to get rid of it. What am I trying to do?
Control.
I'm just trying to control it, right? And I'm trying to, in many ways, put it in its place, right? If that tree thinks that I'm going to let it get out of my hands and, destroy this house, I'm cutting it down, right? Because I got to put the tree in its place. So, leave the stump with its roots in the earth, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, in the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. What do you notice about that phrase right there? And let him be drenched with the dew of heaven.
My first question was, who is him?
Good question. Because it seems like there's been a shift here,
Yeah.
right? We've been talking about it. But then all of a sudden, after saying that you've left the stump, it shifts to, what's that?
It's not a person.
Yeah, so it's now, it started as probably talking about a bigger thing, but now it's getting more specific about a specific person, right?
Yeah.
So the tree, see, it actually seems to tie into the statue, right? Where the statue, if you remember in chapter 2, it represented both a kingdom and a person, right? Because whenever Daniel interpreted the dream, who did he say that the gold represented? Nebuchadnezzar, right? But it also represented Babylon as a whole, right? And so there is this dual nature going on here. which would lead us to think that the him here is a person. And if you're Nebuchadnezzar having this dream and you hear this watcher say this, and it says, let him be drenched with the dew of heaven and stuff like that, then who are you thinking that this is probably talking about? Yourself, right?
Yeah.
you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh, this is about a kingdom. Oh, the kingdom will fall. And you're thinking, oh, okay, well that's just like my first dream, right? In the first dream, I saw that the kingdom would fall. But now it says, let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. What is the dew of heaven?
Like rain.
Rain. So when it's saying let him be drenched with it, what's that suggesting?
That he's going to die in a flood.
He's going to die in a flood? So let me say it like this. You might be tempted to view this as a positive thing at first, right? Why might you be tempted to view this as positive?
It sounds like
on the basic
the tree
level.
You be. You can't hit the microphone, bud.
We're probably gonna have to edit that out.
Hopefully you didn't like.
It's still red.
No, it's
Yeah.
still on.
Yeah. We probably turned the gain up.
Yeah.
He got excited. It's okay, bud. But why might in an ancient culture like this, why might being drenched with the dew of heaven not be a horrible thing?
Well, because rain provides like sustenance.
Yeah.
And there's also, we can think in Exodus, manna, right?
Yeah, rain is a good thing, right? Nowadays, I mean, we get all upset whenever it's raining outside because we can't go outside and play. I mean, I guess we're grown adults, we don't do that. Speak for yourself.
We don't do that.
But in an ancient world, yeah, rain's a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so being drenched with the dew of heaven might sound good until you get to the next phrase.
Yeah, I see
What
that.
were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say, I was thinking because the stump was just cut down, and it seems like if you give rain, that would help it regrow. So that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking too.
Which I think that will tie into it,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that this being drenched with dew of heaven, as we will see later on in the chapter, it is a good thing that will help the tree grow, but it won't be a pleasant experience at the time.
Like if you were to see that like same phrasing in Psalms, it would sound like God like bringing judgment, but then giving you blessings after, like His mercies being new or something like
Yeah.
that. If you were to see that in the different contexts.
Yeah. But I think this is why it's actually so important that it shifts from it to him. Because if you're thinking in terms of a tree, being drenched with the dew of heaven is a great thing, right? It grows back, it's fruitful. But if you're a person being drenched with the dew of heaven, what does that suggest?
Being rained on.
You're being rained on. Which means what about you?
Like you're outside, you're like not protected.
You have no shelter, right?
Yeah.
You're not in a house. And then it goes on, let him share with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Uh-oh. That didn't say it either, right? Let him share with the beasts. What does that mean?
Like the imagery is like he's like out there like and he's like with the flock.
He's eating with the animals.
He's like crawling on the ground.
Yes, so he has no house. He's eating with the animals. That's weird. Again, if it's talking about just a tree still, it's like, oh, okay, that's strange and stuff. But all of a sudden it's like, oh, what's going on here? Now, what do y'all think's the deal with the whole band of iron and bronze? That's the one part I honestly just do not fully have an explanation for.
Yeah, I guess the way I read it initially was just the idea of like covering over the stump so that it would like prevent it for like it was almost like halting growth.
Okay, that would make sense.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that's what it's saying. That's just how I read
Yeah,
it.
no, that could make sense. Yeah, especially because iron and bronze are like stronger.
I was thinking about whenever they plant trees, like I mean nowadays they will put like bands or like rods on them
To direct where it
to
grows.
make sure that it's growing straight, not crooked, not going way outwards or whatever, so that they can further control. Because they
Yeah.
already cut it down once to control it,
When I
and now
first
they're controlling the rebuilding of it.
sorry.
Yeah, it's true.
It's okay.
When I first read it, it seemed like it was God's going to leave a remnant, and then that growth is going to be controlled and managed.
Yeah, which I think you could lean towards if it didn't shift to like the third person singular. Like where it's talking about him to where all of a sudden it's like, oh, I think this is specifically like a targeted thing against Nebuchadnezzar himself, right? And I think that's why Nebuchadnezzar's so scared, because it's no longer just about his kingdom. It's about like, oh shoot, like this seems to be about me.
Yeah.
And then verse 16, let his heart be changed from that of a man, and let the heart of a beast be given to him. Okay, so this seems to be like you're picking up consistent imagery here, right? So he no longer has a house. He's eating food with the animals, and now what does his heart become?
animals.
It's like that of an animal. Like, oh, that's like it's almost like a devolution, right? It's like it's like the idea of like a man losing all of his faculties and becoming beast-like.
It's not the exact same, but it's kind of like how God curses the serpent, where it's like he curses him to crawl on the ground, even though in the story he says, "Cursed above you above all livestock."
Yeah.
So it isn't like a guy being like
Yeah.
cursed to become livestock in the story.
Yeah. Well, but there is even a tie into Genesis chapter 1, right? Where there's a reversal here to where in Genesis chapter 1, you see God makes all these things, and then he makes man, and man has dominion over everything, right? Because man is set apart and different.
Mm.
Whereas now you have man being reduced to nothing but a beast. And now we'll have to ask why that is. Like, why is this a fitting punishment?
I would argue that this could also be seen imagery in our like daily walk in life. Like if we just let everything go and act on our impulses, we're probably no better than an animal.
Well, I think that's ultimately why he's judging this way,
Yeah.
right? The idea is like, you be right here. I can get him to do whatever I want if I offer him a snack, right? Because he does not he doesn't know how to deny himself, right? He simply acts off of his instincts and his appetite. The issue is that a lot of humans are like that too. And that's usually where you get in trouble. And so I think that what we're going to see with Nebuchadnezzar here is that this is going to be an act of judgment because he is basically God saying, it's like the original Beauty and the Beast story. It's like, if you're going to act like a beast, then you can be a beast. You know? But unfortunately, Nebuchadnezzar's not going to have some like super attractive girl just showing up and be like, yo, what up? That's not going to happen to Nebuchadnezzar. So, let his heart be changed from that of a man. Let the heart of a beast be given to him. And let 7 periods of time pass over him. So what's up with that? 7 periods of time.
Maybe we're referencing the 70 years.
Maybe.
Maybe stretching it.
Well, we really don't know. So the answer, I was just kind of asking because we don't know the answer. Most people would lean this towards being 7 years because of details found later on in the chapter. But it doesn't tell us. It could be 7 days. It could be 7 weeks. It could be 7 months. It could be 7 decades. But the issue with that is that Nebuchadnezzar would have to live a very long time.
Yeah.
7 years seems to be the most likely of those. But ultimately, it doesn't tell us. It's just 7 periods of time. Why do you think 7?
Okay. So.
Because, like, ultimately, what is being done here? Like, what is God doing to this person?
Like humbling / punishing?
Yeah, he's judging them, right?
Yeah.
And so, what would be the purpose of a 7-fold judgment?
Like to completion.
It's to completion, yeah. This is like, if you read like Leviticus 26, God says, if you sin and you do not repent, I will heap calamities upon you 7-fold. It's kind of like that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
Verse 17, this edict is by the resolution of the watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High is the powerful ruler over the kingdom of mankind, and gives it to whom he wishes, and sets up over it the lowliest of men. Gosh, there's so much we could talk about here.
Yeah, right?
First off, this edict is the resolution of the watchers? What's going on there?
Seems like it's a divine decision.
It's a divine council meeting, right? This is the stuff that's it's the, like Deuteronomy 32 and like when you read like the book of Job, right? And you've got like this adversary figure showing up at the council of God and saying like, hey God, this is what I want to do. It seems like that's what's going on here. Some people have already also suggested like verses like this might be the reason why elsewhere in like the New Testament, it says that for a little while God made man a little lower than the angels. Whereas when you read Revelation, at the beginning of Revelation, you've got these like 24 elders sitting on their thrones, and they fall before God. And it seems like these 24 elders are supposed to be like almost like angelic figures. By the end of Revelation, though, the people who are enthroned are actually the martyrs from Earth. And so you've got like this shift of power in Revelation to where at the end of the age, the angelic forces who were enthroned lay down their crowns, and then all of a sudden the martyrs are the ones placed in their place. And so some have suggested that, again, this isn't like firm theology stuff, this is just what people suggest. The Bible doesn't give us like a whole fleshed out thing on here. But there is this consistent theme throughout Scripture that for a short while, man was made lower than the angels, but then you also have it being preached that one day man will judge the angels.
Yeah, Paul says that in 1 Corinthians.
Yeah. And so, like, whenever you look at all this together, like, you would look at this, and it seems like this is an action of the angels judging man, right? So the resolution of the Watchers, it's like there was a divine council meeting. They all talked about it. Obviously, God is, like, the head of it, and so, like, he's the one who gives the seal of approval. And they issued a judgment, and then the edict is going forth. That's intriguing to me. I'm like, that is really cool to think about. Just because, I don't know, we often, we try to oversimplify it. We're just like, we kind of just treat God like he's just like some random dude just like floating out in space or something like that. Whereas like, no, like, the Bible seems to suggest that there are these other divine figures that he speaks with, and they have councils. Even though he is like set apart from them, and he is like uncreated, and you know, they are all created beings and stuff. That's just interesting to me. It kind of gets beside the point. I just wanted to highlight that theology like comes from verses like this.
Yeah.
This edict is the resolution of the Watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones. Those are the same people. Which is also interesting because once you get to like the New Testament, it's Christians who are called the holy ones, like the saints.
Yeah.
Intriguing. In order that the living may know that the Most High is the powerful ruler over the kingdom of mankind. So according to the Watcher himself, what is the purpose of this judgment? I love when the Bible just outright tells us what the purpose is.
The living may know that the Most High God is the most powerful ruler.
Yeah, so what are they trying to communicate?
You have no real power.
Yes, he's communicating to the people of the world. God is the head honcho. Do not fool yourself into thinking that you're in charge.
That I am he.
Yes, what does this make you think of? Like, what other passage in the Old Testament? Pretty famous story.
The exile.
I guess God does say that type of stuff in the exile stuff. I was thinking even earlier, another thing that starts with an EX.
Exodus?
The Exodus, right? Whenever you read the Exodus story, time and time again, God says, "Then you shall know that I am Yahweh." And he says that both to Pharaoh and to the Israelites, right? To where that's why he sends all these plagues upon the Egyptians, because he's saying, this is how you'll know that I'm Yahweh. Because if you go even earlier in Exodus, whenever Moses first shows up and says, "Let my people go, for Yahweh has demanded it," Pharaoh says, "I do not know Yahweh. I do not know of this God." And so God says, "Well, I'll make you know who I am." And so this is what Nebuchadnezzar is experiencing. Like, Nebuchadnezzar is the new Pharaoh. He's enslaving God's people. He thinks he's powerful. He thinks he's got the best kingdom ever. That's, you know, the branches are spreading over the whole earth. And God says, "I'm going to cut you down to a stump. And then the living will know that I am the most powerful ruler of the kingdom of mankind." And that God gives power to whom he wishes and sets up over it the lowliest of men. That's cool. So he gives power to whoever he wants. And so according to that, who gave Nebuchadnezzar power? God. And that means that God can also raise up the lowliest person over Nebuchadnezzar. Spoiler alert for next chapter. Not going to go so hot for Babylon whenever the Persians, the Medes and Persians show up. But then also this is really cool because according to us as Christians, this is exactly what happens with Jesus.
The meek shall inherit the earth.
Yes, the meek shall inherit the earth. And then even Jesus himself.
Yeah.
He did not take the form of a royal dignitary showing up with like pomp and circumstance. He took the form of a homeless itinerant rabbi who grew up in meek circumstances and was rejected his whole life. But he will be set up over the, he is the stone that will grow into the mountain. Verse 18, "This is the dream which I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar," notice he keeps calling him Belteshazzar because that is his title according to, his job. "Now you, Belteshazzar, say to me its interpretation, inasmuch as none of the wise men of my kingdom is able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able, for a spirit of the holy gods is in you." So, what does he say?
He's saying none of my other magicians, divine interveners, what be you, could interpret. However, I know you can, so tell me what this means.
Yeah. Again, I just think it's so funny. Like, again, if you're following the character arc here, how much, this literally proves the point in verse 17, right? God gives power to whom he wishes and sets up over it the lowliest of men. Daniel is in exile. That Nebuchadnezzar conquered Daniel's land. And now Daniel is Nebuchadnezzar is depending on Daniel to know what the dream means.
Yeah.
That's cool, right? Daniel's a slave. He's a eunuch. Like, he has no power. Yet he has all the power in the world because he has God.
Yeah.
And you've seen this transition with Nebuchadnezzar to where he's seen Daniel do this before, and now he's seeing Daniel, 3 friends, survive through a furnace. And so he says, Daniel, at this point, I realize what your God can do. So just tell me what the deal is. But also, keep in mind where this story is heading by the end of it. What is God ultimately trying to prove to Nebuchadnezzar? Or let me ask this again. Where does Nebuchadnezzar currently stand in regards to Yahweh by the end of chapter 3?
Like, he highly regards him?
He highly regards him, but he doesn't solely worship Yahweh, right?
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, from our perspective, we view the world in a monotheistic way where there's only one God. That's not how Nebuchadnezzar viewed the world, right? So all because he views Yahweh as a powerful God doesn't mean that Yahweh is the only God,
Yeah.
right? So basically, he said, "Hey guys, okay, you can worship Yahweh if you want, and if you do anything bad to Daniel and his friends or something, I'm going to kill you." But he's not totally bought over. Whereas, what is the whole purpose of this dream?
To show God's power.
Yeah, it is to show that God is the head honcho,
God
right?
alone.
Yeah, he's not just another God. He says, "No, Nebuchadnezzar, let me make this clear. I'm going to cut you down, and I'm going to humble you, and I'm going to do this so that you may know that God is powerful ruler of the kingdom of mankind. He gives power to whom he wishes, sets it up for the lowliest of men." Right? And it's a watcher who probably is equivalent to what Nebuchadnezzar would view as a god who announces this to him. And so by the end of this, if this takes place, Nebuchadnezzar will realize, oh shoot, Yahweh isn't just a god, he is the God. Right? So that's what this is all setting up. Anyways, let's get to the actual interpretation. Good luck, John.
That's chunky.
Yep.
Chunky boy.
Then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, was appalled for a while, as his thoughts were alarming him. The king answered and said, gotta sneeze.
Oh, sorry.
Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, if only the dream applied to those who hate you, and its interpretation to your adversaries. The tree that you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached to the sky and was visible to all the earth, and whose foliage was beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field inhabited, and in whose branches the birds of the sky dwelt. It is you, O king, for you have become great and grown strong, and your greatness has become even greater, and reached to the sky, and your dominion is to the end of the earth. But in that the king saw a watcher, a holy one, descending from heaven and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it, yet leave the stump with its roots in the earth, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, in the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beasts of the field until 7 periods of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the resolution of the Most High, which has reached my lord the king, that you be driven away from mankind, and your place of habitation be with the beasts of the field, and you be given grass to eat like cattle, and be drenched with the dew of heaven. And 7 periods of time will pass over you, until you know that the Most High is the most powerful ruler over the kingdom of mankind, and gives it to whomever he wishes. And in that they said to leave the stump with the roots of the tree. Your kingdom will endure for you after you know that it is heaven that rules with power. Therefore, O king, may my advice seem good to you. Break away now from your sins by doing righteousness, and from your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, in case there may be a prolonging of your prosperity.
Okay. So long story short, what does Daniel say?
He interprets the dream, says, if you continue in your ways, things are not going to go well, your kingdom's going to fall, God's going to give you the man of a... Well, you're going to fall, God's going to give you the heart of a beast, and you're going to be reckless and act purely on impulses, essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
And then he calls him to repentance, right? And again, this is like a very... I'm going to try to compare this to like the David and Bathsheba story where it's Nathan, right? Nathan the prophet comes in and calls David out, essentially. And then he, instead of getting a dream, David is given 3 different options, right, for his punishment. Oh no, actually the better analogy to this was that Nathan tells the child Bathsheba's going to have is going to die, and you see David repent and plead with God. And then we're going to, I believe we're going to see that Nebuchadnezzar is called to repentance, like David is, but I believe he is not going to respond in the same way.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing here is that it's almost like ahead of time. Like Daniel said, like it's almost as if Daniel showed. I mean, it's as if Nathan showed up to David before David slept with Bathsheba.
Yeah.
And said, "Here's what's going to happen, and if you go through with this, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. However, if you stop right now, you can avoid this." But yeah, so what I love about this is that Daniel's basically just like, yeah, the dream means exactly what you thought it meant. Like, he basically just repeats the dream and just says, "You're the tree, you're the tree, you're the tree, you're the tree.
You are the man."
Yeah, you are the man. Yeah, to go with the whole Nathan thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's walk through this. We can probably walk through this a bit quicker just because
It's a lot of repeating stuff.
it's a lot of just repeating because, like I said, the dream is not that hard to interpret. Compared to like the first dream in chapter 2. This dream is like pretty straightforward. It's like, yeah, Nebuchadnezzar, you were scared for a reason because you didn't even need me here. You know what the dream means. Then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar. Again, I like that this is like, it's all from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, right? It doesn't, it's like, even though Daniel seems to be the one writing it, every single chapter he's consistently done this from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective. That's cool. I mean, I guess you could potentially argue that maybe these chapters are just written by Nebuchadnezzar. Maybe that's why it's written in Aramaic. Maybe Nebuchadnezzar actually wrote part of the book of Daniel. That'd be crazy.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. Then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, was appalled for a while, as his thoughts were alarming him. So, how does Daniel respond to the dream?
He's shocked
Yeah.
He's shocked. Why?
because he knows exactly what's.
He's
Yeah,
like, this
he
is-
knows what it
he's like,
means,
oh,
and
oh
worse
boy.
still, what does he now have to do?
Tell the king.
Tell the king, which is not what you want to do. Like this, in most situations.
It's like, oh shoot, he might actually kill me this time.
Yes, like this is not good news. Like, you don't want to tell the king, hey, yeah, so basically God says, screw you, I'm going to put you in your place, have fun eating with the animals, beast. It's like, oh crap. Like, that's like a tough thing, right? And so
Yeah.
he's probably shocked because on one hand, he seems to genuinely care for Nebuchadnezzar. But then secondly, he just realizes, oh crud, I got to tell Nebuchadnezzar this. And Nebuchadnezzar might not care for me as much as I care for him. And I think the king perceives this, right? Because we talked about this. Nebuchadnezzar's a smart guy, right? He's not just like an idiot sitting on the throne. He's a smart guy who got there. Like, so the king answered and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Which is weird because Nebuchadnezzar was pretty scared by it earlier. Why does he say this to Daniel?
Because he wants to tell him the truth.
Yes, he's like, Daniel,
Don't let your fear of what I'm gonna do
yeah.
and like affect what you tell me.
Yeah, he's like, just speak honestly to me. And again, this would seem to suggest to me that earlier on, he could tell, like it's actually, this says a lot about Nebuchadnezzar, because like I contrast it with like think of like Ahaz back in like 1 Kings.
Yeah.
Remember when Ahaz was intentionally seeking out false prophets
Yeah.
who would tell him something good, right? And then like once Micaiah showed up, it's like, ah, dang it, stupid Micaiah, he never has good stuff to say to me. Whereas Nebuchadnezzar seems like a genuinely good dude who's like, I don't want to listen to these false prophets who are going to just tell me good stuff. Daniel, tell me what's true. I kind of like that. Like Nebuchadnezzar just seems like a pretty good guy. Again, we know he was not an amazing dude. He's going to demonstrate himself to not be an amazing person. But there's a reason why God's going to humble him. But you can tell that the way that Daniel is characterizing Nebuchadnezzar in the story is in a positive light. Which, again, is very humbling if you're a Jewish person, right? Because you're supposed to view Nebuchadnezzar as like, oh yeah, like, that guy sucks. He's just the worst. And then you read the book of Daniel, you're like, I can't hate this guy. Like,
He definitely seems better than most of the kings of Judah.
yes. And that should be, like, to me, this foreshadows when Jesus says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. It's not easy, right? But that has been consistently what Scripture wants you to do. Like, whereas our heart naturally wants to villainize everybody. Whereas whenever you actually read the Scriptures closely, God comes across the hardest on his own kings. But then you have people like Nebuchadnezzar, who is arguably he's easily a terrible person, right? He destroyed the kingdom of God. He did it out of his own pride. He's about to exalt himself so proud, highly, that God has to just cut him down. But at the same time, Daniel's like, I don't know, I kind of like the guy. It's it lets you know, this is what it means to love your enemies, right? To where, I just try to read this from a Jewish perspective. Whether you're reading it during the Babylonian exile or whether you're reading it after the Babylonian exile, this should humble you, right? Because what Nebuchadnezzar represents is the destruction of your people, right? That's crazy. That's I don't know. That's like a Jewish person reading a memoir about Hitler written by a Jewish person, and the person has nothing but positive stuff to say. It'd be like, do you not know what Hitler did? It's what do you why aren't you talking about all this terrible stuff? Because that's what we want. We want to hear our enemies slammed. Whereas Daniel is acknowledging Nebuchadnezzar's pitfalls, but he's also just characterizing Nebuchadnezzar as just genuinely kind guy who's tell me the truth. I just want the truth. And then by the end, he's going to be exalting God, which is just that's intriguing to me.
Yeah.
To where if you read it from a Jewish perspective, it really does open your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So Belshazzar answered and said, "My lord, if only the dream applied to those who hate you, and its interpretation to your adversaries." So right off the bat, what does that tell us about how Daniel's going to interpret the dream?
Not good.
Not good for Nebuchadnezzar, right? That's not typically what you want to hear. Man, I wish that this was about anybody but you, because it's not going to be good for you. But that also, again, application-wise, that shows Daniel's heart here, right? Any other Jewish person would be like, I am so glad that this is about you because you suck. Whereas Daniel's like, King, I wish that this applied to anybody else. Mm-hmm. And you get the impression that he's genuine, right? He's not just saying that because he's employed by Nebuchadnezzar. Everything else we've seen in the book so far has showed that he does seem to genuinely care.
Mm-hmm.
The tree that you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached to the sky and was visible to all the earth, and whose foliage was beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field inhabited, and in whose branches the birds of the sky dwelt. It is Babylon. No, it's not Babylon. It is you, O king. You know that those words right there, I mean, it is very similar to the "you are the man" story, with Nathan and David.
Mm-hmm.
To where this is the last thing that Nebuchadnezzar wanted to hear, but he probably already knew, right? He's like, that's what I thought, right? To where this tree is not simply your kingdom, this tree is you. For you have become great and grown strong, and your greatness has become even greater and reached to the sky, and your dominion to the end of the earth. So he acknowledges that Nebuchadnezzar is a very powerful person. But in that the king saw a watcher, a holy one, descending from the heaven and saying, "Chop down the tree and destroy it. Yet leave the stump with its roots in the earth, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, to new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beasts of the field until the 7 periods of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the resolution of the Most High."
Ooh, okay.
Which has I don't know why it does that sometimes. Which has reached my lord the king. So the interpretation is this: that you be driven away from mankind, and your place of habitation be with the beasts of the field, and you be given grass to eat like cattle, and be drenched with the dew of heaven. And 7 periods of time will pass over you, until you know that the Most High is the powerful ruler over the kingdom of mankind, and gives it to whomever he wishes. So this is one of those places where turns out, once again, that God's prophecies are much more literal than expected, right? To where he's like, hey, Nebuchadnezzar, what's going to happen? You saw, or you heard him say, head drenched with the dew of heaven, your head's going to be drenched with the dew of heaven. You heard him say that you would be eating grass in the field, you're going to eat the grass in the field. So just exactly what you saw, that is what's going to happen. Which would be absolutely terrifying if you're Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
It's the idea of being driven absolutely insane to where you are literally reduced to your worst impulses. You're no longer just acting beastly, you are being reduced to a beast. Yikes. And so it'll last for 7 periods until when? What is going to be the thing that causes him to be delivered?
until you know that the Most High is the powerful ruler of the kingdom of mankind and gives it to whomever he wishes.
Yeah, until you recognize that you did not give yourself this power.
Yeah.
Right? You think that, like, he says, yes, your kingdom is amazing and it's huge, but you didn't do this for yourself. And until you realize that, God's going to put you in your place. Because you think, like, it's almost like Nebuchadnezzar exalts himself to be a god. He says, well, God's going to lower you to where you're not even real. He's going to put you below, just as man rules over the beasts, so you, O man, will be reduced to a beast to show how powerless you really are. And you will remain in that state until you realize that the only reason you were in the state above that is because God put you there. Right? If God can reduce you to a beast, then it was the one who took you as a man and turned you into a king. Right? So the idea is that God is the one who controls all this stuff. Which I guess that this is interesting. I guess arguably, you know how there are some people who hold to like the idea of like theistic evolution, right? That's the idea that like, you know, like I wouldn't necessarily hold to like the traditional view of like evolution, right? The idea that like humans came from monkeys or whatever. I would not hold to that. There are some people who are Christians who do hold to that idea, and I guess that this verse could be like a, you know, it could like defend that, even though Nebuchadnezzar is not going to literally become an animal. He's going to have animalistic traits. But the idea is that if God wanted to, he could. That's kind of the whole point, right?
Yeah.
God can make a man into a king just as easily as he can reduce a man into a beast, right? Like the idea is that God is the one in charge of like where you go in life, which I think also applicationally, that's relevant to us as well, right? We have to realize that like there's no room for boasting, right? If you end up becoming like the CEO of a huge company, do not think that it's because you're amazing, right? Yes, you might have been a skilled worker, but guess what? Guess who gave you the ability to be a skilled worker? God, right? And there's a lot of skilled workers who do not end up becoming CEOs, right? And so we just have to constantly remember like that God is the one who puts us in our place, and sometimes He will exalt us as a reward. Sometimes He will exalt us to set up our fall, right? And then sometimes He will humble us as a reward, or sometimes He will humble us to teach us a lesson.
Yeah.
Right? And so we just have to realize that biblically, He's sovereign, right? He's in charge of all things. He is the one who ultimately decides where you will end up. Our job is to simply be faithful and go along with the ride, right? Like ultimately, God will decide who's going to be a king and who's going to be like, you know, who's going to be a prince and who's going to be a pauper. God will decide that. It's our job to simply be faithful regardless of where He chooses. And in that they said to leave the stump with roots of the tree, your kingdom will endure for you after you know that it is heaven that rules with power. So the fact that the stump wasn't totally cut down, what does that imply?
He's like giving him a chance.
Yeah, so like the idea is like once he is humbled, like Nebuchadnezzar being reduced to this state isn't going to result in the kingdom just shattering, right? The kingdom will last even during Nebuchadnezzar's, you know, wandering in the wilderness stuff. So God will give him a chance to rebuild afterwards. So it's not like He's not totally uprooting it, right? Because that is a way it could have gone, right? I mean, that's kind of what God did with the people of Judah, right? He took out their kings and their kingdom, right? In like one fell swoop. That's what He allowed Nebuchadnezzar to do to them. Whereas here, He's like, no, I'm going to leave you the kingdom. So the roots are still going to be there, but you're going to be chopped down, and it's because you're literally being humbled, right? I mean, that's literally like, you know, like you were really big, and God's going to make you really small. And then there will be room for regrowth, and hopefully you'll grow in a healthy manner this time. Therefore, O king, may my advice seem good to you. Real quick, let me check. Did Nebuchadnezzar ask for advice?
No, I believe he.
No, he just said, "Give me an interpretation." I love that. Daniel's like, "Can I add something?" He's like, "Let me just. Can I give you some advice?" He's probably like, "I've heard prophets talk to kings before, and unfortunately, our kings did not listen to the prophets. So I'm going to give you some advice. Hopefully, you'll listen to me. Therefore, O king, may my advice seem good to you. Break away now from your sins by doing righteousness, and from your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, in case there may be a prolonging of your prosperity." So, what is his advice?
Seems like pretty practical advice, but he's basically just saying, show mercy to the poor and to, I mean, honestly, it's basically just kind of like what God told Abraham, but to show righteousness, so it's to judge rightly.
Mhm.
So show mercy to the poor, and by doing righteousness.
Yeah. Why do you think that he highlights those two things? What does that say about how Nebuchadnezzar is currently living?
He is not living in those ways.
Yeah. What is the opposite of righteousness?
Unrighteous.
Wicked.
Or wickedness or unrighteousness? Yeah. Do politicians typically are they typically righteous or wicked?
Wicked.
They usually lean towards wickedness. I mean, technically, all of us do, but typically, whenever people are given places of power, or like whether it's wealth, fame, all that stuff, usually you get to see the worst side of humanity. That's why I always try to be kind of gracious towards like people in power, because like it's very easy for us to criticize them, but you got to realize that like we're pretty wicked when we don't have much. Like imagine that you had a lot of power and a lot of wealth at your disposal. Your character flaws are going to be magnified that much more. So,
Yeah.
Jade lenses.
yeah. Like it's very easy for us to be like, wow, they're so wicked, which they are, but it's also like if you were in the same place, don't assume that you would be better. You'd probably be the same. That's just always something worth keeping in mind. It's like, yeah, the reason why you don't do as corrupt things as they did is because like you were too poor to do it.
Yeah.
Or like I even think about that stuff with like the Epstein stuff like that's going on right now. I'm like, yeah, like everybody's so shocked, like I can't believe that all those rich people were doing that. Rich people are corrupt. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's just because those are the ones who got invited. Like, there's a bunch of poor people who would also go do that stuff if they got invited to it as well. Like the whole idea is just that all humanity is screwed up. Like we're just sinful people. But especially like in situations like this, God does come across harsher on leaders because they are responsible for like.
More people.
Like that usually seems to be why God is harsh on them. It's not because they are more wicked than everybody else. It's just because they have more influence than everybody else, right? And so to me, that's typically where I would be harsher on like powerful people, like politicians and stuff. It's like, I'm not surprised whenever they're wicked. I'm more just like, okay, your wickedness is going to say a lot about like it's going to have a lot of influence on everybody else.
Or like people with like platforms where it's like,
Yeah.
I can say stupid stuff and it might just affect me,
Yeah.
but like I go on a platform and I say stupid stuff and a million people
Yeah.
hear me and they actually listen to it.
Yeah.
I could be hurting a lot of people.
Yeah, that's why the internet age is terrifying. Right? Like, I mean, like even right now, we're recording this, and there's going to be like 5 people who watch it, but still, like you're putting it out there,
Yeah.
which means that we have to be careful. We can say all the terrible stuff for after Bible study. No, I'm kidding. So on one hand, he says start doing righteousness, because kings are not typically righteous, and Nebuchadnezzar is certainly not righteous. He's more wicked. And what's the opposite of mercy?
Brutality.
Ruthlessness.
Yeah, it'd be like ruthless or like harshness, right?
Yeah. Or like exploitation almost.
Yeah. Are politicians known for doing that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of like that's kind of the whole thing.
Case
Yeah.
in point, Iran.
Yeah. But it makes sense why he would say do righteousness and mercy, because these are things that kings are not typically known for, which is really interesting whenever Jesus shows up, because Jesus is like they're like, hey, what does your kingdom stand for? He's like righteousness and mercy. Like he's like, yeah, I just be gracious and be righteous. It's like, oh my gosh, like just the fact that those are his actual platforms is quite surprising. You'll notice that even nowadays, whenever you look at like the top discussions, like even like in American politics, the things that people are typically arguing over are not usually like. I mean, there are a lot of moral matters that people discuss, but they're always just hot button issues. Like there are very few politicians whose platforms are simply about moral uprightness and like being kind and fair and just and pure. Like, and the reason why is because people like that usually aren't going to end up in power, right? That's again why Jesus' kingdom is so surprising. He's like, blessed are the meek, blessed are the pure. It's like usually those are the people who just get like stomped all over.
Yeah.
Whereas like usually politicians, they will choose things that like look righteous and pure and merciful, but usually it's just because it's a talking point of a political party. Whereas you rarely see politicians who are just like, hey, here's this like I just think our citizens should be morally upright people who are serving people sacrificially. Like that would be amazing if we had a politician like that. Like that person will get my vote, but that's usually not what we see.
Yeah.
But he says, do righteousness, show mercy, and maybe, just maybe, you can avoid the coming calamity.
Yeah, or at the very least prolonging your prosperity. So
Yes.
it just sounds like this is the part where like Daniel, like he what's the word? It's almost like if he was reading like a prompt.
Yeah.
It's like now he's finally like off the script. He's like,
Yeah.
look, man. He just like gives like a heart. He's like, my practical advice to you is like, just to help with the pain a bit. You know, you can turn things around a little bit.
Delay the inevitable.
Delay the inevitable, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also because Daniel knows him, right? Well, first off, Daniel knows God, and the Watcher didn't say this might happen. It's like it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so Daniel probably also knows Nebuchadnezzar. He's like, okay, I can see how this potentially, like, I can see where they're coming from because you're a pretty arrogant person. But if you just repent, maybe like you can prolong things a bit. And so we move on. And I would suggest that maybe, like, a lot of people will look at this and they'll say, oh, Nebuchadnezzar didn't listen. I would say that Nebuchadnezzar maybe listened for about a year. So we'll see. Go for it.
All this reached Nebuchadnezzar the king. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. The king answered and said, is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself have built as a royal house by the strength of my power and for the glory of my majesty? While the word was in the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven, saying, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is said, the kingdom has been removed from you, and you will be driven away from mankind, and your palace of habitation will be with the beasts of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass over you, until you know that the Most High is the most powerful ruler over the kingdom of mankind, and gives it to whomever he wishes. Immediately, the word concerning Nebuchadnezzar was accomplished, and he was driven away from mankind, and began eating grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. But at the end of those days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes toward heaven, and my knowledge returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation, and all the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing. But he does according to his will in the host of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. And no one can strike against his hand, or say to him, what have you done?
So he became a bird?
Basically. Seems like it. Yeah, so what happens?
Well,
He gets humbled.
Nebuchadnezzar does a pride. And
He does a pride.
He does
Yes.
a pride.
Very good, Nick.
he does a very prideful, stupid thing and says, but didn't I build this kingdom, and is it not my glory and my majesty? And God's like, alright, to the fields. He basically is like, yeah, no, why would you do that? I literally just warned you in a dream that this would happen to you.
Hey,
And you
to be
didn't
fair, that
listen.
was 12 months earlier,
Mm,
and
fair.
sometimes I forget my dreams a few hours after I have them. But yeah, I think that this is not Nebuchadnezzar though. But
Yeah.
yeah. So, or what's that?
No, I was gonna say, I mean, like, to be fair, like, I think for a lot of people, we read like one verse in between, whereas like for a lot less, we'll be warned about like something that will happen if we like don't do something or do something, and like if it doesn't happen for like a couple of days, you might suddenly think like, oh, it's not gonna happen. Like, you stop taking the warning seriously because like, oh well,
Yeah.
you don't really think that far ahead where you're like, oh well, it's almost like God will forget if like I just
Yeah.
if it just like, you know.
I mean, there have been times where I have heard a sermon and it felt like the preacher was preaching directly at me, and I got super convicted. And then 15 minutes later, I was guilty of just not listening to anything that the preacher said.
Yeah.
Towards like that's just how the human heart is, right? Like we look at Nebuchadnezzar, we're like, you idiot. Whereas I'm more like, that's impressive that he made it 12 months. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, is it I tried to listen to a few sermons about this ahead of time. Like I've heard people talk about this before, and they're like, Nebuchadnezzar didn't listen. I'm like, I don't know. It seems like Daniel knew that this was gonna happen. Like he's like, just delay it. And if anything, it seems like Nebuchadnezzar did delay it. Like it's like it took him 12 months for this to happen. I was like, in Nebuchadnezzar's terms, that's pretty good. Like as a human, like I don't know.
Maybe he thought God wasn't gonna do it after all, and then he just His pride got a hold of him.
Yeah, it just or even he just like let his guard down, right? It's just like
Not to like justify it, just because it is still kind of the whole like the classic scripture combination of like what God already said would happen versus like not versus but just like plus what people are gonna do.
Yeah.
But,
well, and if you like think about you compare this to like the Israelites. I mean, it took them 3 days after the Red Sea to start rumbling.
Yeah.
So in those terms, Nebuchadnezzar made it 120 times longer than they did. You know, like.
Yeah, it's true.
So like it took Nebuchadnezzar a little bit longer to forget like God. So I don't know. Like I just think that whenever people say like, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar's stupid," I'm like, I don't know. Like he still does significantly better than like most people in the Bible.
I mean, if he's stupid, then we're just even more stupid.
Well, yeah. That's the whole thing. We're all stupid.
Yeah. It's at least worth pointing out.
Yeah.
Before
So all this reached Nebuchadnezzar the king. So the information reached him, and I think when it says reached, I think that it probably means like it got into his heart, right? Like it's not just that he heard it. It's like no, he heard it, he understood it, which is a good thing because it'll allow him to last 12 months without boasting. But it also means that when he does boast, he has no excuse, right? Like he knows the interpretation now.
Yeah.
At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. When did we last hear about a king walking on the roof?
David and Bathsheba incident.
Oh no. Is that the first time we brought up David today?
No.
Nope. It's almost like this is just an extended version of the same story, right? The chapter started off and Nebuchadnezzar's like, yeah, I was at home in my palace, everything was going great, and a Jewish person's like, oh no, this is not going in the right direction. And then it's like, so I decided to go for a walk on my roof, and it's like, oh no, like this is, stop, like it's like the equivalent of like a person going into the basement during a scary movie.
Yeah.
You're like, no, like I know where the story is heading. You do not want to go there. Except ironically, he's not going into the basement. He's going
It's
to the roof.
literally like the girl walking into the garage by herself in Scream.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's like, no, don't do it.
Yeah, you're like, do not do this. And some people might look at this and they'd be like, oh wow, these two stories are similar. That probably means that like one of them is false. But like, we believe that history repeats itself a lot, right? I mean, like, it's not like there can only be one person in human history that has ever been proud. It's like, because I'm pretty sure every single person in this room has been proud of something. You know, like, and especially a king, right? I mean, like it makes sense that two different kings would be put in two similar situations that would lead to the same thing, right? Like, this is simply Daniel highlighting the similarities, right? To where I'm pretty sure when you read this, you're supposed to be thinking about the David story because you know where this is going to lead, right? So for 12 months, things are going great. And then he goes for a walk on the roof and you already know where the story's heading, right? Like, he goes for a walk and you're like, oh crud. He's probably going to look at something that he desires and he's going to let his power go to his head and that's going to have to result in God humbling him. Why do we know that? Because that's what happened with David. He was on the roof, he saw something he desired, he let his pride go to his head, he did something he shouldn't have done, God had to humble him, right? This is why reading the Bible is important, right? If you've read the earlier stuff, you'll already know where the story's heading before it even gets there, right? So the king answered and said, wait, hold up, he answered. I mean, we've seen the same phraseology several times throughout this, but I like that it says that the king answered because it's almost like he's responding. Who's he responding to in this situation?
I guess God.
God, right? God said, don't be humble. God said, be humble. And Nebuchadnezzar said, is not this my kingdom? So the king answered and said, is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself have built as a royal house by the strength of my power and for the glory of my majesty? It is ironic that this isn't the exact same thing that David did, right? David looked at a woman who he desired and he slept with her and got her pregnant. But ironically, they flow from the same idea, right? It is a king who thinks that he deserves, he earned this for himself, right? David's like, oh, I'm not going to go off to war. I've earned some rest time. Hey, look, there's a woman that does not belong to me, but I think she belongs to me because I'm the king, right? So it's the same mentality. So he looks and he says, oh my gosh, I am amazing. I am just the best king ever. This is my palace. This is my kingdom. I did all this. Who is God? Basically. While the word was in the king's mouth. Keep in mind that David got away with his sin for a while. Right? David, I mean, he had time to like get Bathsheba pregnant, and the baby was born, and then after all of that, Nathan comes strolling up. Literally, as the word is coming from the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven saying, "King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is said, the kingdom has been removed from you, and you will be driven away from mankind, and your place of habitation will be the beasts of the field. Will be with the beasts of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you know that the Most High is the powerful ruler over the kingdom of the mankind, and gives it to whomever he wishes." All right. So a lot of that we don't have to recap it because it is itself recap. What other places in the Bible do we see things happening while the word was still coming out of a person's mouth? There's one particular instance I'm thinking of, but there might be other ones you're thinking of.
I was actually thinking of this story because of a different phrase in here, but I think also that is also a connection. But I think of Saul with the sacrifice.
Okay.
So I guess it wasn't a word. It was like while he was doing it, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's like while the smoke is like going up in the air, like Samuel shows up.
Yeah. For some reason, I was thinking it was like as he was saying something, Samuel popped up, but I don't think so.
It
Well, the
might
other
be
story
other-
that reminds me of, I believe, in 2 Kings, where one of Elijah's servants goes out and he heals a foreign. I can't remember the names. He heals a foreign military leader who has leprosy. He's like, "Oh, I can give you things like clothes, gold, this and that." As like, "Thank you." And then Elijah says, "This is not a time to receive. Go in peace." He goes in peace. One of Elijah's followers like goes up to him and says, "Hey, can you give me so many shekels of silver and so many changes of clothes?" He's like, "Sure, go. Peace be with you." But heads back, and Elijah's like, "Where have you been?" And before he could even respond, he's like, "I know where you've been. I know what you've been up to.
Yeah.
This is not a time to receive. You have a leprosy."
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of.
And then there's another story with Abraham's servant.
I was thinking
If you remember-
Eliezer.
Yeah, whenever Abraham's servant is like praying and saying, "Oh Lord God, like if you have picked like a woman for my master's son Isaac, let her walk up to me and do all these things." And it says as soon as no sooner were the words out of his mouth, or I think it's literally while he was still praying, Rebecca shows up and like does all those things. And then another example, which we read last week. Do we have a story where somebody is talking, and as they're talking, like the timing is very convenient? This was in the book of Esther.
When Haman is like walking through,
Yes.
and Xerxes just comes up to him.
Yeah.
And it's just like, "Hey, I need you to honor somebody."
Yeah. Ahasuerus is like, "Man, I really want to honor somebody. Hey Haman, come over here." Like literally, as he's thinking this, Haman walks through, and Haman is wanting to talk about like killing Mordecai, and Ahasuerus is like, "What would you do to like honor somebody you really liked?" And Haman's like, "Oh, he's talking about me." And so he starts talking about like exalting him, and then he's like, "Go do that for Mordecai." I wanted to highlight that because in all those different examples, whether you're talking about Elisha, whether you're talking about Abraham's servant, whether you're talking about Saul, whether you're talking about Ahasuerus, whether you're talking about this story, who's in charge of all those conveniently timed moments? God, right? God is the one who's behind all of it. And so, obviously, in this instance, Nebuchadnezzar's like, wow. Like, keep in mind, he's by himself, right? Daniel's not here, right? He is by himself on the palace of his roof. Nobody can see him. Nobody can hear him. And he's just like, wow, look at this amazing
He just has a
built.
mental breakdown.
Yeah, basically, right? He's just looking. He's like, and that's the
He's
irony
like,
of this.
"Wow, this is my kingdom. Isn't it so great? I'm gonna go become a bird now."
Yeah.
And then he walks up into the
But what's
field.
funny about that is the dramatic, it's as he's he's at the height of his pride, and therefore he is humbled to the severest low, right? He's over here being he's like, "Look at me, I am basically a god because of how powerful I am." And in that moment, boom.
I can't imagine what it must have been like for one of his advisors to just be in the castle watching him walk along the roof, and then just seeing him walk away into the fields, and they're like, "Where is he going?" And then for the next several years, he's eating in the fields like a cow.
Yeah, I'm assuming it was probably just a mental breakdown of some sort.
Yeah.
And I don't know. They probably thought that he ate some weird food, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Nebuchadnezzar, please come back." And he eventually came back, but Yeah, that had to be wild.
It's like, nah, I'm gonna watch my grass.
Yeah, I don't think. Long story short, I don't think we should be surprised that this particular story doesn't show up in the Babylonian like annals. Like, I don't think they would exactly mention this about like their best king ever.
Fair.
Like, I know people will be like, "Oh, this isn't mentioned in the Babylonian stuff." It's like, yeah, why would they mention this? Like, this is weird. Like,
Nebuchadnezzar went and ate grass for 7 years.
and then the emperor had a mental breakdown and decided to go chill out in the woods for several years. Like, that's. Yeah, it was weird. And then when he came back, we just put him back in charge. Like, no, that's. You kind of just get over that.
And then when he came back, he stood in front of everybody and said, "This is the decree of the Most High
Yeah.
God."
He's like, during my time in the wilderness, I had a revelation. Anyways, okay. So immediately, the word concerning Nebuchadnezzar was accomplished. Man, that, like, poor Nebuchadnezzar, you wonder if there was like a moment of lucidity where he was like, oh crap. Like, he's like, no. He's like, oh shoot, I didn't know. I thought Daniel had to be present in that moment. And so God heard him, even when he was by himself. Keep that in mind, because that means that he hears us when we're by ourselves as well. And he was driven away from mankind and began eating grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and nails like bird's claws. There's just like something about that description right there grosses me out so much.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the
It's
eagle's feathers part.
basically just like his hair grew really long and his nails grew really long.
Well, and I'm assuming it says like eagle's feathers because eagle's feathers are more like tough. I'm assuming it's just because like he's not taking baths. Like, I think it's like the idea of like it's not like luscious like flowing hair. It's like
Matted.
yeah, it's like matted and gross where you see this guy and he's just like disgusting.
Yeah.
And then like doesn't even like trim nails.
It's, like
It's so
yellow,
funny. I don't
like-
even think about the fact that like ancient people also trim their nails and stuff. Like, that's just funny. Like, you don't think about stuff like I'm like, oh, I guess yeah. He probably was like, here, trim my nails, but I don't know. That's funny.
Also, sorry, as a side thing, it's kind of interesting when you think about it. Like, I guess I thought of it just because of him saying he was driven out, because it made me think of like the garden, exile. But it's like there's like a story of like a mini exile within like the story of the exile.
That's true. Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Nebuchadnezzar is being treated almost like a son of God who is being humbled by being exiled and reduced to nothing in order that he might be humbled in return.
yeah, and it's also he's having like the same lesson the people of like God's people are too. Like, because the whole thing is like God's people are being sent into exile for the same reason that Nebuchadnezzar is being sent into exile.
Which is also interesting whenever you consider the fact that this is like at like the center of the chiasm. Like,
Yeah.
it's like God's mission for the Jewish people and the Gentiles is ultimately the same.
Mhm.
It's that he wants to humble them and bring them back to him.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like even when they're in exile, they're like what they're doing in exile is bringing the Gentiles into the same lesson, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Which is also true for us, right? Like the Jewish people rejecting the Messiah has led to us having to realize that we need to humble ourselves and accept him. Like, it's like same
Yeah.
process. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like even like the 7 periods of time. It's like the 70 years.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Another thing worth highlighting, just briefly, some people have pointed out that like the association of him with like eagle's feathers and bird's claws, it's got like this like eagle-like imagery, like just like he's like a bird, but then he's a man with bird-like qualities. And whenever you in scripture, whenever you think of a man with bird-like qualities, what type of creature or figure do you think of?
An angel.
An angel, specifically like a seraphim or something like that.
Yeah.
And so some have suggested that this language might almost be the idea of like through humbling Nebuchadnezzar, God's also elevating him because he's humbling him to become like a beast, but the seraphim-like Nebuchadnezzar will return, and when he returns, he is making the same proclamations of like the cherubim and seraphim, the cherubim are always singing "Holy is the Lord," like stuff like that, and they're the ones who are like the guardians of the like the throne room of God.
Yeah.
Whereas now you have Nebuchadnezzar, like this whole story has been bookended with like he begins the chapter saying, "I'm going to tell you everything that God has done," and like it's going to culminate in him saying basically, "Holy is the Lord." And so I don't know, that might be a stretch, but just because like the whole chapter it's been like you're going to be a beast, and then once he actually becomes a beast, it describes him not as like
a dog.
a dog or something. It describes him more like a bird. And so people are like, oh, like maybe there's like a cherubim seraphim connection there. I don't know. I find that interesting.
Yeah.
Especially whenever you consider the fact that like the cherubim and seraphim stuff is often associated with like Babylon in particular. Anyways,
Yeah.
so Nebuchadnezzar has 7 wild years. Poor guy. But at the end of those days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes toward heaven, and my knowledge returned to me. And I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For some reason, the phrase "my knowledge returned to me" that reminds me of something in Scripture, but I can't remember. Like I can't place it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my it's gonna like whenever Sean read it earlier, it brought it to my mind as well. But what happens here?
He become man again. No longer a bird.
Well, he was in his right mind.
Yeah, and what causes him to do that?
Because he acknowledged God's power over him.
Yeah. So apparently, when he was in like this like state of insanity or whatever, he was still like I guess lucid enough to be able to acknowledge God, which gives me hope for Yuppie. Maybe Yuppie can. I don't know. I really hope that Yuppie can acknowledge God.
And then he just becomes a person.
Oh, that'd be crazy. That's like the secret, like the true Beauty and the Beast story is like it's not receiving true love's kiss; it's finding true love in the Lord God Almighty. And yeah,
Amen.
there you go. That's he didn't need Belle; he just needed Jesus. So he eventually does recognize, like, oh wow, this is the like it's crazy that it took 7 years. Like you think that he would have made that association, but
Sevenfold.
yeah. But at the end of those days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes toward heaven. And it could also be that he acknowledged this very early on, but he had to do the full punishment,
That's fair.
kind of like the Jewish people, right? At the end of the 70 years, we acknowledged God and returned to the land. Well, they probably acknowledged God was God, like, when Jerusalem fell, but they had to go through the punishment.
Mm-hmm.
So my knowledge returned to me. Man, what is that reminding me of? It's going to annoy me. I'll figure it out, like, tonight at like 1 in the morning as I'm just like laying in bed. I'm like, oh, there it was. And my knowledge returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. What does that sound like? We already read it in this chapter.
The beginning.
It's what he said at the beginning, right? It's literally just, it's bookending the whole story.
He's doing like a full 360 here.
Yeah. So basically, again, it's in media res, right? It starts off with him saying, hey, I'm going to tell you about the Most High, whose dominion is everlasting dominion. And then he flashes back. He tells the story. And he says, for his dominion is everlasting dominion. Which is really cool because, again, at the beginning of the story, we were wondering, how is Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, ever going to come to acknowledge that? And then now we're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. He was reduced to a beast for 7 years.
It's also like worth noting that like usually when people say like, let me tell you guys how all the good stuff God's done for me, we think of like generally positive stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas like the way the narrative is presented is like this is the thing that he's like that God did for him. It's like not a really positive thing.
That's true, right? Whenever we say, like, hey, tell me, what has God done for you in the last few years? We're like, oh, he gave me a promotion. It's like, what has God done for me? He's humbled me again and again. And he's kicked me while I'm down. And he's busted out my teeth. And I'm grateful. Because it's led me to realize that he is the only one who has power. It's like, oh, wow, okay, like, that. It is a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
And it's very unlike how we typically talk about things. Did you have something else you were saying? I feel like I kind of cut you off.
No, you're good. That's all I was gonna say. Just worth noting.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Nebuchadnezzar's just like, hear what God has done for me. And it's like, he really put me in my place. I was arrogant, and now I realize I'm nothing. It's like, I don't know. If you were like say that to a Christian counselor nowadays, they'd be like, you are something. You are enough. And Nebuchadnezzar's just like, no, I'm not. I'm nothing, and that's a beautiful thing because he is everything. It's like, okay, that's true.
All right.
So for his dominion is everlasting dominion, his kingdom endures from generation to generation, and all the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing. Which is interesting, because formerly he was thinking that, if you follow his logic, he thought he was everything because he ruled over all the nations of the earth. But now he realizes, you know what? That's not even that much, right? Like, in comparison to who God is, being in charge of these people, like, they are honestly nothing compared to him. And so me being in charge of them, that's also nothing, right? Like, it's like a human looking down at an anthill, and if an ant were to be like, I am the one in charge of this anthill, I'd be like, all right, cool, stop. Like, like, it means nothing to us because it's a little ant. And so he's like, yeah, these inhabitants of the earth, they're accounted as nothing. But he does according to his will in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. So the inhabitants of the earth are as nothing to him, but they aren't nothing to him. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, so they shouldn't be important to him at all. But for some reason, he cares so deeply about them that he will even interact personally with Nebuchadnezzar and humble him and accomplish his will not only in heaven but also on earth. So, this is like a stark contrast to like some of the pagan gods, right? Who, all they care about is heaven, right? Like all they care about is like their earth, like their heavenly domain. And especially if you look at like the Babylonian myths, the only reason they created humans to begin with is because they needed slaves to take care of the earth so that they could party up in heaven. Mm-hmm. Whereas he says, no, this God, even though the inhabitants of the earth should be nothing to him, he accomplishes his will not only in heaven but on earth as well. So this God is more powerful than our gods could ever imagine that they were, but he also cares more deeply about people that he has no right to actually care about, which is what we would call Hesed, right? Yeah. Like the idea is like he's more believable, like he's bigger than we could ever imagine, and we are smaller than we could ever imagine. But for some reason, he loves us, like he in his bigness loves us and our smallness far more than somebody that big should ever love somebody that small, right? It's like that's just interesting, and he's personal, right? Mm-hmm. And no one can strike against his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" The idea is nobody can talk back to him and say, "Why did you do that?" That's probably a good life verse for a lot of people nowadays who are like, "I don't know, I just don't really like that God told Joshua to kill the Canaanites." It's like Nebuchadnezzar would be like, "Do you know who you're talking about? Like, who are you to question the Almighty? Like you're down here, he's up here. You have no right to ask him, 'What have you done?'" It's like, no, he knows better than you. Whereas Nebuchadnezzar formerly might have, he might have been one who would challenge God and say, "What have you done?" Mm. Whereas now he realizes, he's put in his place. All right, anything I want to add about that? Nope. All right, well, we're halfway through the chapter. Just kidding. 2 verses left. Keep in mind that this is like the very center of the chiasm right here, right? And so these are probably like the central verses of this entire section in the book of Daniel.
We shall spend an hour talking about them.
We probably don't need to because it's all built up to this, so this is it's more like a little conclusion. I mean, we can if you want, Nick. I don't care. I'll go all night. Go first.
At that time my knowledge returned to me, and my majesty and splendor will return to me for the glory of my kingdom, and my high officials and my nobles began seeking me out. So I was reestablished in my kingdom. An extraordinary greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are true, and his ways just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride.
That's good stuff. I love verse 36 because to me it almost reads like the whole, "You had me in the first half, not gonna lie," because verse 36 without verse 37 makes it sound like he just went right back to his arrogant ways. Yeah. At that time, my knowledge returned to me, and my majesty and splendor were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom, and my high officials and my nobles began seeking me out. So I was reestablished in my kingdom, and extraordinary greatness was added to me.
Okay there, pal.
Yeah, it's like, all right, Nebuchadnezzar, you need to chill out a little bit there. But in light of what he's going to say in verse 37, that changes the context of verse 36. What is he actually communicating by listing all those my? What's he pointing out?
He's pointing out that he lost all of this.
That he lost all of it, but also that he is getting it back. Mm-hmm. And what was the difference?
He realized essentially he's not greater than God.
It was given to me by God.
Yeah, his point is God gave this to me, right? Did he do, there could have been a whole, if this were like a movie, you would typically want there to be like a dramatic story where, there's a training montage of Nebuchadnezzar, working his way back into sanity, and then he, has to, work his way through the ranks and eventually rise back up to be emperor. But instead he's like, I acknowledge God, and he gave everything back. That's it. He doesn't get any credit for this. It's not like he was we don't know the practicality of this. It is very well possible that in between verses like 35 and 36 that there were several years where like the people were like, I don't know, maybe Nebuchadnezzar shouldn't have the throne, and like there could have been all sorts of political stuff that took him time to arrive back at the place. We don't know though. He simply says, I acknowledge God and it was given back to me.
Yeah.
Which means that regardless of what happened in between, he views it as God gives, God takes away, which is cool. Because earlier he was like, look at this kingdom that I have got, that I have made, that I have given myself. I've done all this. Whereas now he says, nah, it is all God. Which I think that's cool, to where verse 36 very easily could be the proudest verse in the entire chapter. But instead, he says all of that to say, now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of Heaven. So keep in mind, he says, the King of Heaven. So there might be other gods or watchers or something in the heavens, but this God is the King, right? He is the highest of them. For all his works are true, and his ways are just. Which means that, from his perspective, God did what was right. Right? Like he doesn't seem to resent what God did. It seems like he realizes that this judgment was an act of mercy on God's behalf. Right? God very easily could have allowed him to continue to swallow in pride and die without having realized who Yahweh is. But instead, God humbled him and gave him the opportunity to repent. His works are true and his ways are just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride. It's great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, practically speaking, once again, this is the center of the chiasm. What does this suggest about what Daniel's trying to communicate in his book? Right? The last 3 chapters have been from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective. And slowly but surely we've seen him transform. And it culminates in verse 37. What is Daniel communicating?
Even Nebuchadnezzar's not too far gone.
Yeah. But what's the significance again of Nebuchadnezzar? Like, what does Nebuchadnezzar represent?
The nations.
The nations, right?
Gentiles.
Yeah, and he's not just any Gentile, he is the leader of the Gentiles. And what's happened to him now, by the end of the story?
He's praising God.
Yeah, he's praising God. And there's so much stuff here, right? First off, Deuteronomy 32, right? You've got Israel's failure and rejection of God has resulted in the king of the Gentiles coming to faith in God. That's really cool. But it also communicates to us, which, I mean, if you've been reading, Jesus really gets onto the Pharisees and stuff for missing this point.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pay attention to the Torah, God makes it clear that it was never just about Israel, right?
Yeah.
Israel was, God created Israel to be a light to the nations. And that's why Jesus was so frustrated when he showed up to them. Because first off, they were failing to actually be faithful to God. And secondly, even if they had been being faithful, they weren't actually doing their job of being a light to the nations because they become so focused on themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you look at Torah, the whole goal was always to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Right? Holy is being set apart. And what do priests do? What is their job?
To provide that connection between God and man.
Yeah, they mediate between God and man. So, Israel by design was meant to be a kingdom of priests. What does that mean? What was their singular job?
To mediate between God and the nations.
Yeah, to mediate between God and the nations. But by the time you get to Jesus' time, they're just like, hey, we're the seed of Abraham. We're the ones who are the really cool cats. And Jesus is like, that was never the point. Right? And I think that that's what Daniel's communicating here. Right? To where he doesn't just focus on some random Gentile. He focuses on literally the leader of the Gentiles. And it's not even just the leader of the Gentiles. It is the Gentile who is responsible for tearing down Jerusalem. Right? This should have been I don't know. This is the number one enemy. This is Judah's most wanted. What's that?
I was going to say the last Gentile they think God would turn to.
Yes. In many ways, it's kind of like how the early church probably viewed the Apostle Paul. Right? At first, he's the one who's actively persecuting the church has now been transformed. And then I don't think we should be surprised whenever Paul jumps at the opportunity to preach the gospel before Caesar. Right?
Yeah.
Where he's this is God's heart. Especially because Paul's wanting to preach the gospel before Nero himself, which is the very guy who's going to have Paul killed. And so I think the whole goal of the story is that not only does God care about the Gentiles, But kind of to echo the words of like Joseph in Genesis, what the enemy meant for evil, God can work for good, right? So even through Judah's failure, God is saving the Gentiles, right? To where God is going to accomplish, and this also goes back to the Torah, where God said, okay, if you are faithful to me and you listen to my word, then the nations will turn to you and they will, I'll be magnified through you. But he says, if you disobey my word, then I will kick you out of the land and I will bring the nations to me in spite of you. And so God made it clear that either way, he was going to bring people to him. It's basically just, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can work with me, or I can use you to still accomplish my goals. And it'll take a little bit longer. But yeah, so there's Daniel chapter 4. Is there anything else y'all want to highlight before we wrap up? I'm kind of tired. Anything you want to add? Going once? Going twice? Going 3 times? Alright. Well, Yuppie. You want to add anything? No? No? Okay. He just wants to stretch. Alright. Can I get one of y'all to pray and we'll get out of here? Well, I mean, y'all can hang out, but can you hit the button?
Hello.
Who wants to pray?
Hello there.
Go for it, Nick.
Okay. Dear God, thank you for allowing us to gather here today and go through this passage together and really grasp its meaning and be able to apply it to our own lives and not be puffed up with knowledge or pride or anything of the sort. And we know that you have the ability to humble any of us, even the highest of us. And we thank you for keeping us humble and allowing us to just be able to share in your word and praise you, God, because we know that you're worthy of all the praise and honor and glory that we have to give to you. And none of us would be anything without you. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.